Howdy, y'all. My name is Douglas Young, and this is your no-nonsense guide to streaming data with Aiven for Kafka into Apache Iceberg tables in AWS S3. We're then going to be using Snowflake's open catalog to store the metadata, and lastly, using a Trino container to actually query the data itself. That said, let's dive into the prerequisites that are necessary to set us up for success. I'll put this in the description below, but here's the README. It's going to have all of the code that we're going to need for this. Before starting, ensure that you have your Docker and Docker Compose for running that Trino locally. You're going to want an AWS account and the AWS CLI installed. We're then going to want an Aiven account, an API token, and project. We're then going to want a Snowflake account with Open Catalog access and about org admin privileges for what we're going to need to do. Then I have a Go development environment set up in this code, and that's for the producer code that's going to connect to Aiven for Kafka. But if you have a different client, feel free to use that. Then lastly, we're going to need Terraform CLI installed, which is going to be used both for AWS and Aiven. Now, before we jump into the AWS Terraform, let's first understand a couple prerequisites that we need for the AWS user permissions. We're not going to use STS, we don't have that quite yet for Apache Iceberg with Aiven. However, these are the credentials you're going to need in order to actually set up this Terraform and create the buckets and correct policies and roles. Notice that we're going to be using the name Snowflake S3 role and Snowflake S3 policy. You can change these based off your needs. And then lastly, down here, I just want to quickly note that this is going to be something that you want to put your actual bucket name that you're going to be using. With that said, let's actually dive into the AWS Terraform code. All right, guys, here we are in the code, and we're going to want to go to the Terraform and then AWS setup directory. Inside of here, make sure to copy terraform.tfr's example into the terraform.tfr's file. Inside of here, we're going to want to update the AWS region to whichever one you want to choose. I'm going to use US West 2. Then put in your AWS account ID associated with that user. Put in the S3 bucket name that you want. And then lastly, for this external ID, this can really be anything you want, but just make sure that you remember it because we're going to end up using it in the Snowflake Open Catalog portion. So I'm going to input my variables like this, and then we're going to go down here. And we're going to go into this directory itself, and then we're going to run Terraform apply. This is going to be really quick and speedy. We're going to say yes, and while it's creating, and now it's done. And now that it's done, you're going to want to make sure to copy this ARN because we're going to need to dive and put this into Snowflake Open Catalog. So let's go do that now. So inside of Snowflake Open Catalog, we're going to now create a catalog. So we're going to go into our main menu, go under catalogs, and press plus on the catalog button up here. We're just going to name this temp Iceberg catalog. We're going to want to make sure our storage provider is S3. Our default base location is going to be that temp Iceberg bucket we just created. And then for our S3 role ARN, that's going to be the ARN we just copied. And then our external ID is going to be the external ID we also just created. And this is going to make sure that they can talk to each other. And we're going to press create after looking at all of that, making sure it looks good. And now we have our catalog created. Now what we're going to want to do is create a connection. So we're going to go into this connections tab and click plus on connection. We're going to call this temp connection. Go into our query engine, and we're going to be using Trino. We're now going to want to create a new principal role. So toggle this tab, and let's create the name. So temp principal, and press create. Now we're going to make sure that we're going to copy this client ID in secret, and now we're going to go back to the catalog. Inside of here, we're going to want to go back into our temp Iceberg catalog, and we're going to copy this IAM user ARN. With that, we can go back to our code, and we can uncomment this Snowflake IAM user ARN. You can then go here, paste that there, and then run Terraform apply. That's going to fully connect all of our roles and policies with Snowflake itself. So say yes, and I'm on caps lock, so I got to run that again. So we're going to go back, run Terraform apply, and say yes, and then that will update that. With that done now, we can go back into Snowflake Open Catalog, and we can create a couple things. The first thing we're going to create is a role. So let's click plus on the catalog role, name it temp catalog, go to select privileges, and we want to make sure we're giving it the catalog managed content. Press create. And now with that created, we need to grant it to the principal role that we just created earlier. Pick the correct catalog role and then pick the temp principal. Now we have assigned the principal roles to itself. And lastly, let's just create a namespace. So inside of here, let's just call it temp. Press create. And with that, we have everything we need for the Snowflake Open Catalog portion. So let's jump into the Aiven for Kafka. All right, guys, we're back into the code here. And what we're going to want to do is go into the Aiven setup directory. Inside of here, go into terraform.tfvars.example, and we're going to want to copy this into the terraform.tfvars itself. For the Aiven API token, we're going to want to get that through the Aiven console. We can go to the top right here on this little person icon, and we can click on the tokens tab. Then we can also get the project name through going to our organization or organizational subunit, and then going to your project. Mine's going to be deyoung demo. We're then going to create our Kafka cluster name that we want in Aiven, the AWS access key ID, and the AWS secret access key associated with that user, an Iceberg catalog URI, which is going to be our Snowflake Open Catalog URI, the principal role that we created earlier, and the client ID and client secret associated with that. We're then going to use our catalog name itself. And then for this last one, we're going to use temp.product. Now, temp is the namespace of your choice, and then product is the table that we want to create in for our metadata. And we're going to name it product because I'm going to be mocking product data with my client. And with that done, we can now go into our terminal and we can cd into the Terraform and then Aiven Terraform, and we can run Terraform apply. And we're going to say yes. And now while that gets to creating, I'll be right back. All right, we're back, and it looks like everything just finished up for our Terraform. That should be finishing up within 10 minutes usually when you start. Now we're going to go into our Aiven console, and we see everything is up and running well. Let's dive into our Apache Kafka cluster itself, but you can also see we have the Apache Kafka Connect cluster. So when we dive into here, we'll see all of the connection information nicely laid out to us. So we're just going to copy that service URI, and we're going to go back into our, let's go to our main.go file itself, scroll to the top, and we can put the address right there. And then we're going to want to copy the access key and put that information inside of here. We're going to want to copy the access certificate, put that information in here. I think I copied that incorrectly. Correctly. There we go. And then lastly, the ca.pim in here. Sweet. And we have all of that information now. So now we can go into the head of our directory. We should be able to run main.go, and that should send about 15 messages to our Kafka cluster. And then all of that information should nicely end up for our Trino container to be able to query. So we're going to try showing that now. All right, let's dive into the Trino container, and then we can go to the Trino directory, the etc directory, the catalog directory, and lastly, pick that iceberg.properties file. And we want to update all of the variables here to reflect what we have. So we want to make sure we have our Snowflake Open Catalog URI, our principal role that we created in that connection in Snowflake Open Catalog, then the associated client ID and client secret here. And then we want our actual catalog name itself, along with the S3 endpoint and S3 region. Now just make sure that whatever region these are reflect the same in your AWS S3 bucket that you created. And once we have all of that information right here for us, we can go down here, cd into this Trino container, run docker compose up, and then we can do tac d. And then I'm going to quickly grab this docker exec command from our README. And now we've executed into it. And now we can try to select all of that data from iceberg.our namespace, .product. And then let's limit it to those 15. And we get all of our data, and it looks like it's queried correctly. So That's all for this no nonsense guide and tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.